underneath everything, there's this simulation pulse. So you look at the game and you think it's a city, but what it really is a big clockwork simulation that's running underneath everything. And that clockwork simulation has a frequency. Time advances, at the slowest speed, time advances twice per second, so tick, 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 like that, and everything is synchronized to that. So the footsteps of people and the light switching, from red to green, and the people turning their lights on in their house and people leaving for work, it all happens on that beat. And so if you listen, you'll hear that the music is on that beat as well. And so the whole world is choreographed to that as you go across. And it's not something I wanted to hit you over the head with. I wanted to keep it subtle and something that you discover after you've been listening to the game for a little while. But you'll see, the puffs of smoke coming from the smokestacks, the water pump going, goof, goof, all of that is synchronized to the heartbeat of the simulation. That's sort of the organizing time period, of the whole game. We built our own programming language for writing the simulation called Glassbox. The lead engineer on the project is a guy named Andrew Wilmot, and he has kind of a habit of making special purpose languages to do special things. So he made a language for writing particle effects and explosions and stuff like that for an earlier project. And for SimCity, he made this thing called Glassbox, which is a scriptable simulation environment. So we have designers who can just directly script in the sorts of behaviors that they want. They can make a little house, for example, and then they can write the rules for that house. That house can have 10 people in it, and those people need this much money, and they go to work at this time of day. And if they don't get money, what's going to happen to them? They'll be kicked out, and they'll have to be homeless on the streets. And so there's this little private language that we've created, and we can kind of mesh together all the behavior of the simulation with. And it's funny because after you've been using it for a little while, you start seeing the world in those terms. You see the traffic light change color and you think, oh, I know what rule just fired, or you see people getting in their cars and driving away and you go, oh, yeah, that rule must have fired at that point to make those people get in. And so it bleeds into reality. You walk down the street and you start thinking that you're seeing the outcome of all these rules in this little language fire. And of course, it's occupational hazard when you're writing simulations to see the world as a simulation. We have this grammar of the simulation, the bits and pieces that we then assemble sentences out of, and then those simulation sentences become entire stories, and the stories are your city and how your city is alive. A lot of the fantasies about what kind of cities we'd simulate go all the way back to SimCity 3000. I was the art director in SimCity 3000, and SimCity 4, where I was the art director and creative director on that as well. But we just couldn't do them. I mean, the computers weren't nearly powerful enough. We wanted to have a simulation where every person was a named person going to do something on the street. So you find somebody and you can click on them and you say, well, that person, that person's unemployed and they're looking for a job and they came from that house and they're sick too. So you want to have that level of specificity where everything in the world is real. Everything in the world has its agenda. Everything in the world is running its own simulation rules. But I mean, that was completely impossible in 1998 when we were making SimCity 3000, and still completely impossible in 2001, 2002 when we were making SimCity 4. And it had to wait until computers are powerful enough, where you could just simulate everything directly. You could just make every building be its own little simulation, and every car be its own little simulation, and let the entirety of the city emerge out of the interaction of all those elements. Previous SimCities, because of the computation limits that we had to define them in a top-down sort of way. We had to say, this is all that the thing can do, and it's built out of these parts, and that's all there is to it. The new SimCity, by contrast, because computers have gotten powerful enough to let us do this, we can make all the cars, we can make all the houses, the factories, the offices, we can put them together and let the behavior of the city emerge out of all their interactions. So it's not a top-down simulation, it's a bottom-up simulation that comes out of all the actors in the action, in the simulation. The buildings are really doing a job. They're not there to just look like buildings, they're there to tell you what's going on in the simulation. So instead of kind of saying, well, we like houses that look like this with pretty pink shingles and stuff like that, we have to tell ourselves, what job is this house trying to tell you as a player? And what its job is to communicate something to you. So the house has to say, what's its wealth class? Is it upper class house? Is it a lower class house? Is it a middle class house? You have to say, what's its density? Is it just a single family house, or is it a condominium or apartment block, or is it a giant tower, you know. And so those are some of the basic things. And then you have to say, you know, is the house inhabited? Are people there? You know, does the house have power? Is the house in a crime-ridden neighborhood? Is the house dilapidated and abandoned? You know, does the house have water? So all these things that that the simulation is doing have to be represented in the artwork. So what I did is I took the 1,000 most common male and female names, and I took the 1,000 most common last names, and I put them into the game, and then mixed them up randomly. So when you go to a little household, the little household will be, well, there's the Quigley household in there, and then the little person coming out of there may well be, I mean, there's a one in a million chance that you'll see Ocean Quigley, you know, in there. But really, if your name is a pretty common name, first name and last name, then the odds are that you are actually in the simulation somewhere. You know, that you could spend your time trying to, is that me? No, is that me? Is that me? And find yourself. And then, of course, the same thing is so that was done with US Census data, but the same thing has happened to all the different countries that the game has been localized to as well.